Hello, hello. Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay.
喂，好，欢迎大家回到我们共读美语好时光。好，那我们现在教室有很多设备都已经升级了哈。对，那就是大家可以注意到，就是我们把萤幕加大了，啊，加宽加长，后面可以看得比较清楚。但是我们就是最前面这张桌子不能坐人哈，因为他的头会马上挡到萤幕。不是这个，所以我把它撤掉了，把它撤掉。好，对，那就是。那我们之后也会准备电子白板，但是我可能要花点时间引导 Douglas 去习惯电子白板的使用所以之后我们会这个电子白板就是那个原本白板后面那个大萤幕会更大，会更清楚。那 Douglas 写过的东西，它也可以不用擦掉，它可以记录，就是你可以回去看，那也可以输出答案给大家看，所以那个电子白板功能，我之后会尽量为大家去熟悉之后，跟 Douglas 去让大家使用。那今天就是用老方法，我们就用我们熟悉的白板老朋友好，那注意事项大概就是这样。好像我们教室因为夏天要节电所以如果觉得冷气不是很够的话，请见谅我们已经开到16度了，它还是这个样子，我也没办法。好，那剩下时间我们就交给大家跟大家叙旧，好久不见好，谢谢大家。
Thank you. Well, when I came here, I went to the wrong classroom, so I'm probably some of you did too. But yeah, it's nice to be back in our old room, and it looks like we have a new upgrade here, so that's good. Bigger screen. Hopefully, you can read that clearly. So anyhow, it's been over a month since I was here, and hope you're all doing well. I got back about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, anyhow, on the 7th, I got back, and I was telling Miller that it was a very enjoyable trip, 2.5 weeks back to Pennsylvania, Bingzhou, and it was very funny because first of all, I'll say yesterday for me was kind of like Freedom Day, because yesterday and today I was feeling very good driving my motorcycle all over Taichung without a mask on. So, they changed the rule now. You don't have to wear a mask when you ride a motorcycle or a bicycle or walking. 运动. So it was funny. I went back when I got on the airplane in Taoyuan in June. I flew United Airlines, 联合航空公司. And as soon as we sat down in the airplane, we were still at the airport. The flight attendant came on and they said, because we're an American airline and we follow American FAA rules, you don't have to wear a mask. So it's up to you. But I think it's funny. I think most people probably kept their mask on, except when they were eating. But they told everybody, if you want to take off your mask during the flight, that's okay, because this airplane is American. So then I got to San Francisco and I landed, and of course in the airport, I noticed probably about, I don't know, maybe 80-90% of people were wearing masks. But then I flew to Chicago and it seemed like there were less masks. And then the further and further I got, and then by the time I got to Pennsylvania, Bingzhou, the next day I went out and it was like COVID-19 had never happened. Seriously. And so the whole time I was in America, the first day I felt very 很奇怪, I felt very strange. I had my mask on and I went and I was looking, I was like, nobody's wearing masks. So I was like, swine. So I took off my mask. And so for the next 2.5 weeks, it's really interesting when you go to the US, it feels very normal. I would say, if you go to a supermarket, maybe you'll see 2 or 3 people wearing masks, but everybody else, no masks. So, I think Americans want to just put it behind them. We say, put it behind them, And my friends are in Europe right now, Ojo, and they say it's the same way. Nobody's wearing masks. It's very normal. So yeah. So I think, but obviously people are still getting sick. One of my friends from Taiwan, American friends, he flew back to the U.S. and within 2 weeks he had COVID-19. But he's fine. I mean, he's okay. So I think that people are just kind of learning to, as we say, live with COVID-19, right? It's just another. You get sick and that's it. You hopefully get better. Okay, so anyhow, it's good to be back. It's hot, but that's fine. I like this kind of weather. But it's funny. It's hot here, but it's much hotter in other parts of the world. My friends, again, who are in Europe right now, they say it's 40 degrees, 40 度, so very, very hot. Okay, so speaking of Europe, I thought we would start with a European-related article. It says EU's beer, now beer, of course, doesn't mean pijo. I mean, it's their last name, urges China to stop threats. Deep concern, the vice president of the European Parliament said that the EU would stand up against any provocation or threatening of the cross-strait status quo. Now, we've talked about this word several times before. What does status quo mean? Yeah, the present state. Status usually means, what is your situation? What is your status? I know that many of you are probably on social media, and sometimes on social media, people will put their relationship status. Are they married? Are they dating? Are they single? Whatever. But we could say, what is the status of this computer? What is the status of, so of anything? So when we say, what is the situation? So this is a Latin expression, and as he said, it means just keep everything the same. Don't change anything. So why don't we say it one more time? Status quo. Status quo. Let's say this word one more time. Status. Right. So if we say, what is your status, or what is the status of your car? It means this. What is this? Sometimes another way of putting this, and obviously the words are related to each other, is you say, what is the state of something, right? State has different meanings. It could be like Joe, right? The state of Pennsylvania. But you could say his state of mind. What is his current state of mind? This is an expression we use a lot. State of mind means how is he feeling right now? What is his emotion? Okay. So you can say he's in a very delicate state of mind, or he's in a very difficult state of mind. It means that his emotions are this way. Okay. So state is like status. What is the state of, or what is the condition? So we could say the condition, we could say the situation. These words are all very similar to each other. Okay, so let's say it together. State of mind. State of mind. Condition. Condition. Situation. Situation. Okay, so yeah, you could say age is a state of mind. I like to think that way. But yeah, if we could say age is only a state of mind, it means that you're only as old as you think you are or feel you are. Although obviously that's not 100% true. It's also physical. So anyhow, deep concern, the vice president of the European Parliament. Now, Parliament, we've said this before. It's like Congress. It's like 立法院. It's whatever. So, but in the UK and in Europe, they use this word. So why don't we say together, Parliament? Parliament. Okay, so they said the EU, the European Union, would stand up against. Okay, stand up against means to oppose, to challenge any provocation. Now, again, another word we've talked about before, provocation comes from the word what? Provoke, right? If we say to provoke, okay? And I've said this before, but provoke means to kind of push someone or to challenge someone in a way that causes them to react. And I think I used the example before. When I was very small, when I was young, sometimes my sister and I would get into fights or arguments, and my parents would tell me, because I was the older one, they would say, do not provoke your sister. Because if I start bugging her, bothering her, maybe she will get angry, or maybe she would provoke me, right? Maybe she would do something to make me angry or start a fight. So we can provoke someone to anger. We can provoke a fight, an argument, or even a war. So why don't we say it together? To provoke. To provoke. And then this becomes a noun, means a provocation. Provocation. Okay. So this is obviously the EU Parliament Vice Chair or President is telling China, don't provoke trouble. Okay, yes. Yeah, you could say to poke someone, but it's a little bit less clear what that means. You could say to poke trouble, but I think provoke is probably a better word. Yeah. So, because someone's making somebody do something or maybe challenging them, to do something. Okay, so it says European Parliament Vice President Nicola Beer in Taipei yesterday urged China to refrain from threatening gestures that could alter the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. Okay, so refrain, what does refrain mean? Yeah, if we say, sometimes it's considered polite language if you go into a meeting, or a concert, 音乐会, and they say, please refrain from talking during the performance, or please refrain from using your mobile phone during the performance, okay, or something like that. So refrain from means do not do that. Basically, refrain. We usually say refrain from. Okay, I refrain from speaking during the concert. Okay, I refrain from speaking to him about the situation. Okay, so to refrain from is to not do something. So they urge China to refrain from what? Threatening gestures. Okay, what's a gesture? Not so much posture. Gesture is actually a movement of your. Normally, gesture would be like what I'm doing right now. I'm moving my arm. I'm gesturing. If someone says, come here, or hi, to wave or you move your arm is often to gesture. Like he gestured at me to come over. Okay. But gesture here means like an action. Okay. A motion. Okay. That could, but obviously we wouldn't say threatening motion. Normally we would say threatening action. We could say threatening action that could alter. So threatening gestures. So gesture is kind of like when you do something, you take not so much attitude. Gestures actually means you do it, right? It's not just your thinking, not just your mind. So for example, you could say, I thought that he carried my bags to the car in a friendly gesture. Okay, so by carrying my bags to the car, helping me, it was a friendly gesture. It was a friendly action. Okay, you could say that a polite gesture would be to I don't know, to help somebody carry their bags to the car. I don't know. There's many polite gestures we make, or friendly gestures, or unfriendly gestures. Okay. So gesture can physically mean waving your arm or doing something with making a motion, right? But it can also mean to take a certain action. Okay, does everybody understand that? Okay, so let's say it together, gesture. Gesture. Okay, so threatening, of course, would be an action that threatens Taiwan. That could alter, what's another word for alter? Change, yeah, why don't we say alter? Alter. Now, I think I've told you this before, but there's another word that's pronounced exactly the same, but it's spelled differently. Altar. What is an altar? Yeah, well, it could be in a church, or it could be even in, I'll tell you, in Taiwan, many homes, they have a special table where they bye, and that table is often described as an altar. Okay, so it's like a table or a thing where you worship. Yes, yeah, okay, that would be, some people might just call it a table, a special table, but you could also call it an altar. So in a church, there's also often a table, especially, Tianzhu Jiao and Jilu Jiao, they have I don't know what you call it, communion where they drink the wine and eat the bread. And there's usually a special table for that. We could call that communion like an altar, a table. So table and altar are kind of similar, but it has a religious idea to it. Okay. So why don't we say? Well, we say it's pronounced exactly the same. Altar, altar, and of course that's spelled with an A, not an E. Okay. So if it's yeah. Yeah, usually. I mean, I'm sure there's probably slight variations or changes between different churches, but yeah, sometimes it's decorated. But yeah, there's worship or something religious that goes on at that altar. Now, of course, it's not just Buddhism or Christianity. It could be any religion where there's a special table or place where people worship. Okay. So anyhow, yeah, altar. Just remember the E. Alter means to change, and AR means a place of worship. Okay, so to alter or to change. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, so why don't we read this together? European Parliament, Vice President Nicola Beer, in Taipei yesterday, urged China to refrain from threatening gestures that could alter the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. Okay, one more word, one more time, gesture. This T has more of a CH, ch sound to it. So why don't we say it again? Gestures. Okay. So it says, Beer made the statement during a meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. We call on the People's Republic of China to refrain from its threatening gestures and instead take an active and constructive part in maintaining and securing the current status quo based on neutral and respectful dialogue, Beer said. Okay, so dialogue at the bottom there, what does dialogue mean? Yeah, conversation, right? If you say, I have a nice dialogue with him yesterday. It can also have the idea, often I think when we say dialogue, it has the idea of a discussion. Like I'm discussing something with somebody. So you say, I want to have a dialogue with you about what we should do for this problem, or how we should solve this problem. So if I say I want to have a dialogue with somebody, usually it means I want to discuss something with them. Now this word, I've seen it spelled without the U and E. I've seen it spelled D-I-A-L-O-G, but I think I like to spell it that way better. Anyhow, let's say it together, dialogue. Okay, so here again, the PRC, the People's Republic, trying to refrain from, to stop doing something, to stop what? It's threatening gestures, and instead take an active, to actually do something, and constructive. Now, if we say something is constructive, what does that mean? Obviously, when you think of construction, you think of building something, right? You can say they're constructing a new building or they're constructing a highway. But here, if you say as a 形容词, something is constructive, what does that mean? Yeah, it's good. It means it's building something. It's doing something, usually positive, right? Well, always positive, I think. Constructive generally is positive. So if, I'll tell you where this word gets used a lot. 批评 is criticism, right? So if often we say your criticism, your 批评 should be constructive. Or you can say, I gave him constructive criticism. Of course, if you 批评 someone just to be mean or rude or cruel or whatever, or just to put them down, that's not good. But if you criticize something or someone to make it better or to improve it, then we say constructive criticism. Okay, that's a very common term. So anyhow, constructive part in maintaining and securing the current status quo. So he says, they should do something constructive to maintain this. So why don't we say it together? Constructive. Okay, so they want to do that. She asked them to do that based on a neutral and respectful dialogue. And I think we said this before. What does neutral mean? Yeah, it means in the middle, balanced. Sometimes we use the word balanced. Sometimes we use the word, we could say balanced or unbiased. Now, neutral, like neutral means you don't take sides, okay? But I think that, the idea is that it's not really biased. If you say, I want to have a dialogue with you, but I have lots of conditions. You have to agree to this, and you have to agree to that, and you have to accept this. That's not really neutral. If you just say, I want to have an open discussion with you or open dialogue with you, it means that I'm willing to talk about anything. Okay, so we say balanced. It means there's not one, it's not this way or not that way. It's unbiased. It doesn't lean this way or lean that way. Okay, so why don't we say these two? Balanced, balanced, unbiased, unbiased. And I've taught you this word before, bias, B-I-A-S-E-D, right? You could say, I'm biased towards Japanese cars. If you think, oh, Japanese cars are the best cars in the world, you could say, I am biased towards Japanese cars. Or if you think American cars are no good, you might say, I'm biased against American cars. It means I don't like American cars. So yeah, that's a word that we use. But if you're unbiased, of course, you don't really have any strong opinion or idea about that. So why don't we say that word together? Neutral. Neutral. Yes. Yeah. Well, neutralize the enemy doesn't really mean to destroy the enemy. It means to make them unable to fight or unable to harm you. So if you neutralize something, you put it into a condition where it cannot hurt you or harm you. But it doesn't mean to destroy someone. So if you, well, I mean, I guess technically it could. I mean, if you destroyed someone, they can't hurt you anymore. But it doesn't always mean to destroy something. So, well, that's neuter. That's a different word, to neuter. Neuter means you make an animal so it cannot recreate. What? Neuter, neuter. Neuter means to take any animal and you make it so it cannot reproduce. So, in Taiwan, they have the stray dogs and stray cats. Sometimes they neuter those animals so they can run around, but they can't create more animals, right? So we say to neuter something. Actually, that's a good word. Let's say the Neuter. Let's say it together, neuter. Neuter. Okay. So now neuter can also mean if you not literally, it doesn't mean you actually do this to somebody, but if you neuter somebody, it means also you can make them so they're not able to do anything. They're kind of impotent. They're not able to be effective. Like if you say, I feel neutered by my boss at work, it means my boss has made it impossible for me to do anything. I can't take any actions. I can't be effective. I can't do my job. I feel neutered. So that's a funny expression. In what? Yeah, well, it's more, I mean, you could say I feel, yeah, there's probably better words than neutered in that regard. Neutered means that someone's actually blocking you from doing something, So, but here, let's say this neutral, if you neutralize, like he said, to neutralize with an I-Z-E, it means you put it in a state where it's not able to take action against you. Now, I guess you could destroy something, and so it's neutralized. Like in a war, you neutralize the enemy. But you could also say to neutralize the enemy might mean that you make it so that it's impossible for them to harm you or do anything anymore. And maybe there's other ways to do that. Maybe you just keep fighting until they don't have any power left or something like that. Now, I'll ask you, because we use this word a lot, what are some neutral countries in the world? Switzerland, yeah, they're probably the most famous neutral country. They don't take sides, right? during World War II, you know, there was war all around them, but they just kind of sat there. Yes. Well, I don't think people see it that way right now, but I think the problem if you're a neutral country, other countries have to respect your neutrality. Okay, we say neutrality, I-T-Y. Neutrality is a 名词. You say, I want to keep my neutrality, okay? But if, let's say, another country like China says, well, I don't really agree that you're a neutral country, you belong to me, well then, 没有办法, right? Right. So actually, that's a very good point. Switzerland maintains a very strong military to protect their neutrality. You know, in Switzerland, all men have to serve in the military, and they also regularly do military 演习. One thing that's very unique about Switzerland is all the men keep their guns in their military, you know, their military rifles. They keep them at home. So you when the army gives you a gun, you take it home and you keep it at home, and so that if there's a war, you just grab your gun and you go. So if Taiwan wants to be neutral, I think they need to do that. Be more prepared, like Switzerland. Well, there are lots of mountains, but Taiwan does too, actually. You know, they have Taiwan is 2/3 mountains. So there's a very interesting thing. There was another country in Europe that was neutral until recently. What country is that? Where? Korea? Not that's in Asia, of course. You mean like Hanguo? I would say Korea's not really a neutral country because they have an enemy that they're. But yes, Sweden, Radian. Okay, so Sweden was a neutral country during World War II, but then what did they do recently? They decided to join what? NATO. Yeah. Okay. Because of Russia and the war in Ukraine. So Sweden, we could say, is no longer a neutral country. So why don't we say together, neutral, neutral. And I've told you this before. One more thing, neutral, you see a lot on your what? Car, right? If you have your car and you have, it says N and you put it in neutral, it means that the gear is not engaged. The car can just roll. Yeah. A what? Yeah, you could, because the poison could harm you, right? If you should do or poison, yeah. But then you take some medicine that will neutralize the poison, meaning the poison cannot affect you anymore. So yeah, you could say that. So often we say to neutralize actually I'll teach you, I think I've taught you this word before. To neutralize. Yeah. It's called It's called anti-venom. Venom? I think venom. It's not venom. I think it's spelled antivenin. I think anti-venom. It's got a very specific word, but it's a special. They take it to neutralize the venom of the snake. Kind of, yeah, anti-venom. Oh. Yeah, I know the main thing is you have to take the right anti-venom because every snake has different venom, right? So, yeah. So anyhow, long discussion on it. So why don't we read this here? Sorry. So let's start here. Beer made the statement during a meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. We call on the People's Republic of China. Let's say it one more time. People's Republic of China. To refrain from its threatening gestures. And instead take an active and constructive part in maintaining and securing the current status quo. Based on neutral and respectful dialogue. Beer said. Okay. Now that's a photo caption. So it says here, Beer is leading a delegation from the European Parliament in Taiwan through today. While the EU remains committed to having good relations with China, it has deep and serious concern about China moving in a direction that could unilaterally alter the status quo in cross-strait relations, she said. Okay, so we've said this word, I'm sure, many times. Unilateral means what? One-sided, right? Lateral, lateral means kind of refers to the side. So if you do something unilaterally, it means you don't talk to anyone else, you just do it on your own. Now, if two sides cooperate, we've learned this before, what do we say? Bilateral, right? Let's say, you can say, the US and Japan are having bilateral discussions, okay? It means on both sides, or bilateral cooperation. So we had a bilateral, sorry. Or if it's three sides, we say trilateral. And I said before, if it's more than three sides, normally we just say multi, M-U-L-T-I, multilateral, means many different sides. So if there's like 5 countries and they're having cooperation or discussions, we could say multilateral discussions or multilateral cooperation. Okay, so let's say this word together, unilaterally. Let's start with the first word, 形容词, unilateral. Unilaterally. Right, so unilaterally, of course, is a 副词, adverb. Okay, so they don't want China to unilaterally, means on its own or by itself, alter or change the status quo in cross-strait relations. Okay, so let's read this. Beer is leading a delegation from the European Parliament in Taiwan through today. While the EU remains committed to having good relations with China, it has deep and serious concern about China moving in a direction that could unilaterally alter the status quo. In cross-strait relations, she said. Okay. So here it says, only Taiwanese can decide their nation's future, Beer said, adding that societal development should continue in a free and peaceful manner. Now, societal, of course, is related or similar to the word social, right? Social, S-O-C-I-A-L, social development or societal development, but really refers to a society, right? Our society. Okay, so yeah, I think it is, we do use it sometimes, but I think, it's social obviously has more than one meaning, right? You can say, I like my social time with my friends. It means to have an interaction or a friendly time, or, we say interpersonal time. So we can say, I socialize with my friends on weekends. Okay, we go out for dinner or we do something. So, but societal specifically focuses more on society, not on my personal social interactions with people. Although you could use social in this way too. So anyhow, why don't we say together societal? Societal. Okay, so let's read this. Only Taiwanese can decide their nation's future, Beer said, adding that societal development should continue in a free and peaceful manner. Manner, of course, when we say manner, it means a way, a style, right? You can say what his manner of behavior, or his, Now, of course, we could say someone has good manners with an S. Manners means your behavior, like your 礼貌, you can say, of course, when you're a child, your parents hope usually to teach you to have good manners, right? I remember when I was very young, my biggest problem at dinner time was I would eat too fast, according to my mother. And she was always saying, you need to slow down, because I would finish before everyone else. Even when we had guests or I was at someone else's house, I would eat really fast and then I'd just be sitting there. And my mother would be like, okay, you need to slow down. Quit, eating so fast. It's impolite to eat too fast. That's a good question. That's actually a very good question. I would hope so. I would hope that parents would today teach their children good, we say table manners. But who knows? I don't know if people care about that anymore. There's things that change. But yeah, table manners would include like sitting down and putting a napkin, on your lap. In fact, I still do that. The problem in Taiwan is the napkins are usually too small, right? They're about this big. So you can't, but sometimes if you go to a nice restaurant, they'll give you a bigger napkin or even a cloth napkin, and then you can put it on your seat. I will say, whenever I fly airplanes and they give you a meal, I always put that napkin on my lap, because so many times, you know what an airline meal is like. It's tiny, right? And everything's very small, and you're trying to pick stuff up, and it seems like always something falls in your lap. So, it's not just good table manners to use a napkin, but it's also practical. It's good. It's a good idea. You mean to pray? I do, yeah, because I'm a Christian. But obviously not Christians don't all have to say prayer, but that's not really considered manners. That's more of just a religious practice. Yeah. So yeah. Well, no, we wouldn't say table gestures, but you could say his manner is a certain way. That means his behavior is a certain way. So, but if we talk about the word manners with an S, it's always with an S, then we're talking about your behavior, your politeness, your 礼貌, are you acting in a way? So you could say, does he have good manners or bad manners? Okay. Yeah. But yeah, you could say his manner seems very strange today, or he acted in a very strange manner, like his behavior, his way is kind of strange. But that's without an S. That's with like here, a manner, a peaceful manner, or impolite. Yeah. So, okay. So here it says Europe would stand up against any provocation. This is the word we just talked about. Provocation or threatening of the status quo, while working to contribute to peace and stability in Asia, she said. Now, stability, of course, it comes from the word stable, S-T-A-B-L-E, stable. Stable means, 稳定. It doesn't change too much. Obviously, if you put up a building, you want it to be stable. You don't want it to fall over. You could say somebody is a stable person. It means their emotions are pretty stable. They don't go like up and down. They're pretty stable. Okay. You can talk about a stable relationship. Our relationship is very stable. It's not all over the place. Okay. So why don't we say it together? Stability. Stability. Of course, what's the opposite of stability? Instability. So I-N-S-T-A-B-L-I-T-Y. So why don't we say it too? Instability. Instability. Right. So we could say right now the war in Ukraine has created a lot of instability in Europe, well, in the whole world. Okay. So stand up against, of course, means to challenge. If you stand up against something, you're challenging or even fighting against it. You're going to oppose it. O-P-P-O-S-E, oppose, to challenge, to fight against. Okay. So let's read this. Europe would stand up against any provocation, or threatening of the status quo, while working to contribute to peace and stability in Asia, she said. Okay. Taiwan is a responsible and reliable international partner, Beer said, speaking favorably of a bilateral investment agreement between Taiwan and the EU, as well as an upgrade of the EU's representative office in Taiwan. Okay, so reliable means what? 可靠, right? You say something is very reliable. Why don't we say together, reliable? Reliable. Because call, if you want to call something, R-E-L-Y, to rely on something, you can say, I rely on him to make sure everything is finished. Okay, so responsible and reliable international partner speaking favorably. Okay, if you speak favorably of someone, it means you're speaking positively, 肯定的, it's a 副词, the favorable. But you can say, I feel favorably towards him, means I feel positive towards him, or I have a good feeling towards him. Okay, so it means to favor, of course. That comes from the F-A-V-O-R, to favor someone or something. Okay, so why don't we say together, favorably? Favorably. Okay, and here's that word we just talked about, bilateral, right? Two sides. Okay, bilateral investment agreement between the Taiwan and EU, and an upgrade of the representative office in Taiwan. So upgrade means to move up, to make better, to improve, right? Like I said, I just came back from my trip. Sometimes, not often, but occasionally, and this has happened to me, when I went in to check into the airline at the airport, they said, we're going to give you an upgrade on your seat. And I was like, yeah, okay. So upgrade means, we're going to move you up. I still remember once I was in Tokyo waiting for a flight back to Taiwan on Japan Airlines, and they called my name on the announcement. They said, Douglas Habecker, come to the airline. And I thought, this is probably a problem, right? What's wrong? And I went to the counter and they said, "Oh, we're going to upgrade you to first class." I was like, yeah. So I think what happens sometimes, I've seen this more than once, is economy class gets filled up, right? And they need more seats. So then they have extra seats in business class or first class, so they just upgrade someone so they have more room in economy class. And I will say that there is an advantage if you're traveling by yourself, because I think it's easier to upgrade one person. But if if you're with your family or someone else, then they have to upgrade 2 people or more people. But if you're by yourself and you look okay, I mean, you don't look like someone who's dangerous, then they say, okay, we'll upgrade that guy. Take turns what? First class. Yeah. That's never happened. Yeah. I don't think so. I think if you get upgraded, then you have to stay there. But I will say this. I was very lucky. I have pretty good luck when it comes to flying. When I flew from Taipei to San Francisco, it's 11-hour flight. So it's a long flight. Coming back, it's even longer because of the jet stream, the air. And so coming back, it was like 12-13 hours. But going to San Francisco, the flight was almost full. And I like a window seat, and there's 2 seats next to me. And I thought, okay, and the plane was filling up. But then there was one guy sitting next to me, and the flight attendant came and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, your seat back video screen is broken. So we'll move you to another seat." And so I had 2 seats next to me open, so I could kind of, but then coming back, there was 2 seats next to me, and there was someone sitting there, but the seat right next to me was open again, and the flight was full. So I don't know. Maybe people don't want to sit with me. So yeah, they're scared. They're like, okay. But yeah, I've been very fortunate in that regard. In the flights I will say this too. The flights, especially in the United States, but even internationally, we're 100% full. I mean, completely full. So people are really flying again right now. A lot of my friends are flying out of Taiwan right now because suddenly it's okay, right? You don't have to Geli, only 3 days, it's okay. So one of my Taiwanese friends just told me yesterday. I said, "Oh, can we meet up?" And she said, "Oh, I'm flying to Hawaii tomorrow." I was like, "Hawaii?" So yeah, so she's going to Hawaii, and I have friends that are in Europe right now and back to America, and so everybody's flying. And in the U.S. right now, and I know in Europe, airports are crazy because there's so many people flying. And I think the airlines have kind of during COVID-19, they've reduced their employees and they've reduced their flights and everything, and many people are no longer working for the airline or the airport. So U.S. is pretty chaotic, luan. But I heard Europe is even more luan. I don't know if you've seen the news with all the luggage, the bags. People, there's hundreds of thousands of bags in these airports, and they're left there. The airline lost them, or they left them there, and they have to find the owners, and maybe 1 week or 2 weeks later. So it's kind of crazy. Well, right now it's expensive. Round trip, you're talking about now it's around 5-6 Yeah. So it's about one third, about 30% more than it used to be. Used to be you could buy a ticket to the East Coast of the United States for maybe about 4万, but now it's like 1/3 more than that. So it's not cheap. But I will say it's cheaper than I thought it would be, because I heard people telling me that air tickets are very, very expensive. So, but you have to go see your family, right? I've been saving money for 2.5 years, so I can go now. So yeah. Everything's upgraded. So yeah, you get everything. You get the nice seat. You get actually, I was in a seat where you could, not this trip, this is another trip, but you could lie down, It's like it turns into a bed. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. I've never had this before. So yeah. Yeah, if you want champagne, everything. Yeah. Everything, the meal, everything. Yeah. So, but I will say, if you get upgraded to business class or first class, it's very difficult to go back to economy class, right? Because you're like, you know, what you have all the leg room and the nice meal and the good service, and then you have to go back to the old economy class. So, okay, so let's read this. Taiwan is a responsible and reliable international partner, Beer said. Speaking favorably of a bilateral investment agreement between Taiwan and the EU, as well as an upgrade of the EU's representative office in Taiwan. Right. I'm not quite sure what that would mean. I mean, EU already has an office here, so I don't know what an upgrade means, but anyhow, maybe more people working there. So it says here, Taiwan and EU relations have progressed a long way, Beer said, adding that her visit as vice president of the European Parliament is indicative of that. Now, this word indicative is very similar to the word what? To indicate. Now, if you indicate, we've talked about this before, to indicate means to show, right? To demonstrate. You can say he indicated that he was very happy with his meal, or he indicated that he was going to leave soon. So it means to show or to reveal or show something. So indicative means that it reveals or shows that, it demonstrates, it expresses something, right? 表现, okay? So her visit as she's a vice president of the European Parliament, indicates or reveals or shows or demonstrates or expresses, okay, there's many words, that Taiwan EU relations have come a long ways, have progressed a long way. They're moving in a good direction, okay? Does everybody understand that? Okay, so let's read this. Taiwan EU relations have progressed a long way, Beer said, adding that her visit as vice president of the European Parliament is indicative of that. Indicative. Yeah. So you can say if something reveal or expresses something, you can say, I'm trying to think of another example. Yeah, I don't know what would be indicative of something. You could say the what? Yeah. So we could say the stock market is indicative of the economy, or indicative of more importantly, probably indicative of people's confidence, right? If people have confidence, they'll buy stocks. If they're not confident, they'll probably sell stocks. So we could say the stock market is indicative of everyone's confidence about the current or future situation. Okay, so this word is very useful. We can use it in many ways. Okay, so the EU Parliament is pushing European institutions and its members, also in their respective national member states, to develop ever closer relations with Taiwan in the economic field, sciences, student exchange, and agriculture, she said. Agriculture, of course, is 农业, okay? So they're pushing European institutions. Now, an institution could be anything. It could be a library, it could be Congress, it could be a parliament, it could be, anything. It could be a department, okay? So, and members also in their respective national states. Now, we've talked about this before. Respective means like the British guy is from England, the French guy is from France, the German guy is from Germany. So respective. What respective country do you come from? Okay. Their respective national member states. So people who are members of each country. to develop ever closer relations with Taiwan in the economic field. Of course, we know that. And then student exchange and so on. Okay. Okay, so let's read this. The EU Parliament is pushing European institutions and its members also in their respective national state. Sorry, let's say this again. Also in their respective national member states to develop ever closer relations. Let's say it again. Ever closer relations with Taiwan in the economic field, sciences, student exchange, and agriculture, she said. Say it one more time. Agriculture. Yeah. So here it's an interesting word here. Ever closer. Okay. Now we could say even closer, but when we say ever closer, it has a slightly different idea. It means that it's always growing. It's always getting better. You could say the ever improving, the ever growing. You know, like we think of the word evergreen, right? Evergreen means always green, right? So ever closer means it's always growing. It's, continue, it'll keep growing. Not just, if we say even closer, that might just be one time, right? Let's get even closer. But if we say it's growing ever closer, means it's continuing. It's going it's progressing. It's moving in the right direction. So ever closer. Yes. I think because she did not use this word. So when they put this in here, that means the writer, who wrote the article, is inserting that word to express what she was trying to say. So she might have said to ever closer relations with Taiwan. So they inserted the word develop. She didn't actually say the word develop, but that's what she meant. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting that European countries EU, I think it's very positive. Just 2 days ago, I was at Jialefu again, and I noticed now they have even more beer from Lithuania. Lithuania, Litauen, right? It seems like I'm seeing more and more Pijo from Litauen in the Jialefu, and even at the OK Bianlishang. So whenever I see it, I buy it to support Taiwan's friend. But I noticed they have lots of beers from the small Baltic, I think we've said this before, right? Litauen, Lithuania, and Latvia and Estonia are all considered, we say, Baltic countries or nations, okay? And we say Baltic because there is a sea there called the Baltic Sea, okay? Baltic, Baltic. How do you say it in Chinese? Okay, it sounds very similar. So why don't we say together, Baltic countries. Okay, so yeah, I noticed there's more and more products from the Baltic countries in Taiwan, probably because those small countries support Taiwan. So yeah, hopefully you can say it's Baltic, Baltic. One more time, Baltic. Yeah, okay. It's a long word. It's a little bit hard to pronounce. Okay, so there you have it. Lithuania, okay? Let's say it one more time. Lithuania. Okay, and then the other two countries, we have, Latvia and Estonia. I think there's only three, right? I think there's three. Okay, so let's say these other two. Latvia, Estonia, Yeah. So yeah, these are all the Baltic nations or Baltic countries. They're all tiny, and they're right there. Yeah, right next to Russia. Yeah. Okay. But they're actually very. Their economies are very high tech. 高科技. There's a lot of high tech industry or information industries in these countries. So they're actually very quite advanced. And I don't know, actually. That's a very good question. I don't know if they're Slavic or not. Actually, I think Estonia, it's one of the countries, their language is actually very similar to Finland. Because Finnish, the Finnish language is very unique. It's different from the other European languages. It has a strange connection to other, if you research it, Finland, their language is different from the other neighboring European countries. But I think it's one of the, I have, it's from somewhere else. Yeah, I have many Finnish friends, and I always found their language to be very, very difficult. I tried to learn a few words. Actually, I'll give you a little secret. My very first girlfriend was from Finland in high school. So, yeah, so I had to learn a few words. Yeah. Actually, Finland is not considered Scandinavia. It's considered, I guess you could call it probably a Nordic country because it's in that northern European area, but it's not technically part of Scandinavia. Scandinavia is Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, but Finland is kind of its own unique position there. Yeah. Yeah. I've never heard that, but maybe, who knows? That would be quite strange, interesting. Yeah. Who knows? Okay. Let's just read a couple more paragraphs and then we'll go to a different story. Here it says, this is President Tsai now. Tsai expressed the hope that the sides would begin talks for a bilateral investment agreement, saying it would generate even greater well-being among our people. What does well-being mean? What are some other words for well-being? We could say, actually the first word that came to my mind, well, I would say this word, prosperity. Now, of course, prosperity usually refers to more material well-being, like your money, finances, material, what you own, prosperity. But, someone is very prosperous. But well-being could also be your mental well-being, you're in your head, or you could be your health, your physical health, your 身体健康. So there's many different kinds of well-being, but when I think of this kind of well-being, of course, that we're talking about investment, 投资, then I would think about prosperity, okay? Because it's usually money or economy. So why don't we say together, prosperity? Prosperity. Of course, the word prosper means to do very well. And then, of course, if someone is prosperous, R-O-U-S, prosperous, then the prosperity is a 名词, but prosperous would be the 形容词. He is very prosperous. He's a prosperous businessman. So why don't we say it together, prosperous? Prosperous. And then the verb, to prosper. To prosper. Right, okay. Yeah, so that's a good word. So let's read this together. Tsai expressed the hope that the sides would begin talks for a bilateral investment agreement. Let's say it one more time. Bilateral investment agreement. Saying it would generate even greater well-being among our people. Okay. Taiwan looks forward to boosting cooperation with fellow democracies to jointly create a resilient democratic alliance, Tsai said, adding that the nation could share its experiences of being on the front line for the defense of democracy. So here we have fellow democracies. Of course, fellow, it sounds like male, but it actually just means other democracies, right? You could say fellow nations or fellow democracies, or just means others who are like you, okay? So fellow democracies to jointly, of course, means together, create a resilient. What is resilient? We talked about this before. What is another word for resilient? There's a very simple word for resilient. Strong, right? Strong. If we say something, or tough, tough, strong, So why don't we say together resilient? Resilient. Right. You could describe a person. You could say a person is very resilient, or our economy is very resilient, or this building is very resilient. Okay, so resilient democratic alliance. Of course, alliance means like a cooperation. That's why if a country is your friend, we say an ally, right? A-L-L-Y, an ally, a friend. An alliance would be someone you cooperate with. So let's say together, alliance. Alliance. Okay, so she added that the nation, Taiwan, could share its experiences of being on the front line for the defense of democracy. Of course, this fight for promoting or defending democracy. So Taiwan is on the front line, of course. Okay, so let's read this together and then we'll go to a new story. Taiwan looks forward to boosting cooperation with fellow democracies. Democracies. To jointly create a resilient democratic alliance, Tsai said, adding that the nation could share its experiences of being on the front line for the defense of democracy. Democracy. Right. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? It's funny. I was telling my friend the other day, I said, suddenly everybody's visiting Taiwan. I heard Nancy Pelosi from the Speaker of the U.S. House. She wants to come here. And this woman's here. And then the Japanese Parliament is sending somebody here, or a group here, a delegation. But that's good. I mean, that's the more people who visit Taiwan, the better, I think. Taiwan is, hopefully we can also get tourists visiting Taiwan again too. I have friends who want to come to Taiwan right now, but because Taiwan does not accept guangguangke yet, they cannot come. So I hope that changes soon, because I think a lot of hotels and restaurants and other businesses, they really, really would welcome more tourists. But also, actually some of my friends are also wanting to come to Taiwan, just simply visit their families. And they don't, these are like some of my Taiwanese American friends. They don't have 居留证 or 签证 or 身份证. So they cannot come here to visit their families because they're not a resident and they're not here for business and they're not a student. So they're just waiting for Taiwan to open so they can come and visit on a tourist visa. So I think that should happen soon, hopefully. Okay, so when I looked at this article, the first thing I saw was his name, and I thought, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I think it's Wickrem Singh, okay? Wickrem Singh, okay? So let's try that. Wickrem Singh. Yeah, maybe one of my Sri Lankan friends will correct me on that. But wins vote for Sri Lankan presidency. Okay. Now, I think you've been following this. This has been a really big crisis for this country. And what's what kind of amazes me is that, and if you read the studies, Sri Lanka should be a very, very prosperous, successful country. You know, they've got the same number of, almost the same number of people as Taiwan. They're an island. They're near India. They've got the beautiful scenery and natural resources. So it really should not be this way. But you can see what happens when you have bad leadership, right? Well, and they make bad economic choices and other problems. So anyhow, it says 6-time Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected as crisis-racked Sri Lanka's new president in a parliamentary vote yesterday with the backing of the disgraced former leader's party. Now, what is disgrace, this word here, disgrace or disgrace, what does that mean? Yeah, if you lose your reputation, like if you do something that hurts your reputation, okay, it makes you, it brings you down, okay? So in Taiwan and any country, sometimes you'll have somebody who's very famous or they're very respected, and then there's a scandal, right? They do something or something happens and everybody's like, oh, that person's no good. And their position, their status or their reputation comes down, okay, or goes to the bottom. And we say they have been disgraced. Or you can say as a 名词, this is a disgrace. Okay, so let's say you go somewhere and you see someone doing, or a group of people or people doing something that is very, very unacceptable, or it's making them look bad. You can say that is a disgrace. They should not do that. Okay, I don't know. Let's say let's say you go to the beach. The high. It's summertime, so you go to the beach, the high bin, and people are throwing 垃圾 everywhere. You could say that's a disgrace. They should not be doing that. That's terrible. Okay. So if you find some sort of behavior unacceptable, you could say that is a disgrace. Or you could say that is, as a 形容词, disgraceful. So it'd be disgraceful. Disgraceful. That is disgraceful. Okay. So disgraced here is also a 形容词. It describes this former leader's party, okay? So you can say a disgraced leader, a disgraced person means someone who has been disgraced, okay? Yeah, it's shameful, but it's very, usually a disgrace is quite serious. So it means it brings your image, your reputation way down, okay? And we see this every day, right? Somebody who's very famous, like a movie star or a politician or a leader, and everyone loves them, everyone respects them, and then suddenly something happens and they are disgraced. Maybe there was some corruption or 贪污 or something like that, and their reputation goes down. So why don't we say together, disgrace, disgrace, disgraced, disgraced, and then disgraceful, disgraceful. Right. So that's a good word. It's I don't think we've talked about that word before, but yeah, it's a good one. So 6-time, I mean, this person has been prime minister 6 times. So 6-time becomes a 形容词. 6-time Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected as crisis-racked Sri Lanka. Now, I think we've talked about this before. I think of course, you know what crisis is, a big problem. But when we say, again, these two words become a 形容词, what does crisis-racked mean? It means there have been many, many, many crises, okay? Not just one crisis, but if something is racked by, it means it has been constantly harmed or hurt by something. So, for example, if you describe someone as being pain-racked, P-A-I-N, pain, it means they're just in pain all the time. You could say that he was pain-racked after his motorcycle accident, okay? So it means you're always constantly in pain, or you've been in pain for a long time. So crisis-racked means there's been many, many crises, not just one, but there's been a whole string of crises, okay? And as we know from Sri Lanka, that's true, right? They've had all kinds of problems. And there's, of course, they kicked out the old president or prime minister, well, and the whole government. Okay, so why don't we say together, crisis racked. Crisis racked. Now, when we use the word racked by itself, we can say racked by something, racked by crisis, racked by pain. It means constantly struggling or working or having this problem. So crisis racked Sri Lanka, that describes the country, new president in a parliamentary vote. Okay, so they voted in him, and he was backed. Okay, he was supported with the support of, we could say with the support of, with the backing of the disgraced former leader's party. So the former leader, who was disgraced, his party supports this new guy. Okay, I don't know if that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. So yeah. Okay, so let's read this together. Six-time Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was elected as crisis-racked Sri Lanka's new president in a parliamentary vote yesterday, with the backing of the disgraced former leader's party. Let's say that again. Disgraced former leader's party. Okay. Here's a little question. Do you know what the original name of Sri Lanka was? Yeah. So it's a word you don't see. If you look at a very, very old maps, not that old, maybe, I think Ceylon, I think is how we pronounce it, Ceylon. And so it was a British colony. It was under the British for quite a long time. But yeah, when it was under the British, it was known as Ceylon. And then when it became independent, a nation, it became Sri Lanka. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so let's keep reading here. It says, official results gave the veteran politician 134 votes, an absolute majority in the 225-member parliament after, another name, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, this one's easier, fled the country and resigned as president in the wake of protesters overrunning his palace. Okay, so when we say, we've talked about this before, when we say in the wake of something, what is a simple way of saying that? After, yeah. You could say there was a lot of damage in the wake of the typhoon. It means there was a lot of damage after the typhoon. There was big changes in the wake of the election. It means there are big changes after the election. Okay, so in the wake of, now, I think I've told you this before, but what is a wake? Does anyone know? Of a what? Behind a ship. So if you see a chuan, especially 大船, and it's moving along, and behind the ship there's this water that at least it creates like a path, a trail behind the ship. That's called a wake. Where you can see, it almost looks like you can see in the water where the ship has gone. That kind of disturbed water behind the ship is called a wake. Okay, so if we say in the wake of something, it means kind of behind it or after it. Okay, so this guy, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, fled the country. He, Tao Pao, and resigned, means he quit, 下台, as the president in the wake of, or we could say after, in the wake of what? Protesters overrunning his palace. Okay, so I think maybe you've seen the news. There's a presidential or prime minister palace. Now, palace normally we think of a very, very fancy house or building, but of course, and this is a nice building, but it's where they call that where he lives, right? And they overran it. When they say overran, it means they came in and they took it over, right? There's pictures or video on TV of them. They're sleeping in his bed and they're swimming in his pool and they're eating. They're just relaxing and enjoying his house. So yeah, why don't we say together, overrunning. Overrunning. Palace. Palace. Okay. So let's read this. Official results gave the veteran politician 134 votes. An absolute majority in the 225-member parliament after Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country and resigned as president in the wake of protesters overrunning his palace. Palace. Okay. Now, I think you know, when we say absolute majority, majority means, more. Absolute majority means it's complete. It's, if you have 134 out of 225, you have a complete majority, right? You can control the parliament. There's no question there. Okay. So he says, our divisions are now over, Wickrem Singh said in a brief acceptance speech in Parliament, urging his defeated rivals to join me and work together to bring the country out of the crisis we are facing. Okay, so acceptance speech. If you are elected or you are chosen or you're appointed to some new position, especially a high position, you would probably give an acceptance speech. It means I accept this position. I accept this honor. So, every time there's an election and the president, whoever wins, usually will give here it says brief, short, acceptance speech. Okay. Urging his defeated rivals. And we said before, what is a rival? Someone who is your competitor, sometimes someone who's against you, but it could be someone who is competing with you again, like in a race or election or something like that. So why don't we say together, rivals? Rivals. Okay. So he urged them, he's saying, join me and work together to bring the country out of the crisis we are facing. Okay. And that's very important because one thing right now that Sri Lanka desperately needs is money. And that means someone's going to have to give it to them, the IMF or the World Bank. And they can't do that unless they have a stable government. If there's no stable government, then Swanla, they won't get any money. So yeah, this is a big problem, or challenge, I should say. Okay, so our divisions are now over means that we're no longer divided. We're not divided, we shouldn't be divided. So our divisions are over. Okay, so let's say this together. Our divisions are now over. Wickrem Singh said in a brief acceptance speech in Parliament, urging his defeated rivals to join me and work together to bring the country out of the crisis we are facing. Okay, so it says, That's a good question. I think they probably could, but it would be very difficult because, when you trade with somebody, you have to guarantee you're going to pay them, or especially if you're buying something, right? And as you can see, if you've watched the news, the problem right now is Sri Lanka is out of money. So they can't even buy fuel, gas, So there's no gas. They said they had to stop. This is kind of crazy. They had to stop school because they're out of paper. No paper. So that's kind of crazy, right? Paper. if there's not paper for the students, that's pretty serious, right? So it shows you that a lot of these products are imported, right? They come in from outside and you have to pay for them. You need money to buy them, right? So yeah. So it says here, Wickrem Singh takes charge of a bankrupt nation that is in bailout talks with the IMF, with its 22 million people, enduring severe shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. Okay, so bankrupt, you know, right? 破产, right? You say a company, a country, even a person can be bankrupt. So why don't we say together, bankrupt? Bankrupt. Okay, now bailout, this is a very common word, but bailout, what is to bail out someone, or a bailout? Here's a 形容词. What does that mean? Yeah, to rescue somebody. So I'll tell you where the word originally comes from. If you're, again, from a boat, 船, if you're in a boat and there's water coming into the boat, what do you need to do? You need to bail the water out. Now, so that word comes from, you know, you take, sometimes you have a cup and you're taking the water and you're throwing it out, right, of the boat, so the boat won't sink. So we call that to bail out the boat, or to bail the water out of the boat. So, but here, of course, we're talking about money or something else. So if you say, I need a bailout, usually it means I need money so that I won't sink, okay? So here we say bailout talks with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So let's say together, bailout. Bailout. Okay. And it's 22 million people are enduring. Of course, we've said to endure means to a little bit like 辛苦, you know, to go through something, you know. So to endure a sickness, to endure a typhoon, to endure severe shortages of food, fuel. Of course, fuel means like gas or oil, and even medicine. Okay, so let's read this. Wickrem Singh takes charge of a bankrupt nation. Bankrupt nation that is in bailout talks with the IMF, with its 22 million people, enduring severe shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. Okay, let's say shortage, of course, means 缺了, you know, 缺 something. You could say there's a shortage of oil, or shortage of bread or wheat or something like that. Okay, he was backed by the Rajapaksa's Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Party. Lots of words here. Still the largest in parliament, and is despised as a proxy for the former leader by the protesters after months of demonstrations over the economic crisis. So, okay, so first of all, this new Wickrem Singh, he is backed by the Rajapaksas. Now, this is the name of the former leader, right? Now, and it's very interesting. This is another big problem. I don't know if you've read this. Not only was this guy the prime minister, but his brothers were all in power too. His brother was economic minister. His cousin, you know, it was like his whole family was running the government. So this family, Rajapaksa Sri Lanka Podujana Party, so this is their Dang. It's still the largest party in parliament. And so this is referring to Wickrem Singh. Wickrem Singh is despised as a proxy. Now, if you despise somebody, what does that mean? D-E-S-P-I-S-E. What's a simple word for despise? Despise, another word for despise is simply hate. Hun, I hate something, okay? If you despise, you can say, I despise chodofu or whatever. Yeah, I'm okay. I like chodofu, but yeah, but it is a strong word. If you say you despise something, it means you really hate it. You can say, I despise corruption, you know, 贪污. I despise war. I hate war. Okay, so anything you really hate. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Despise. Despise. Okay, so he is despised. This guy Wickremesinghe is despised. He's hated as why? As a proxy for the former leader. Now, I don't know if we've used this word before. What does proxy mean? Well, no, it means you are like, well, I guess you could say substitute, but it's like kind of like a representative, 代表. So I'll tell you where I see this word a lot. In Taiwan, like sometimes when for example, my building, my apartment building, if they're going to vote on something, like they're going to 投票, they ask me if I will give my proxy, 委托, 委托人. That's called a proxy. So let's say I don't want to do it myself, but I'm going to give my 权利 to somebody else to represent me or to do it for me. I will give my proxy, or I will say, so I can give my proxy, or you can say that person is my proxy. He is my proxy. Okay, so that, I see that a lot in 委托人 or something like that. Does everybody understand that? So here, of course, he is considered a representative, a proxy for the former prime minister, for the former leader. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Even though he says, well, I'm my own person, but people think, nah. This guy is just representing the old leader. Okay. So why don't we say together, proxy. Proxy. Okay. So he is hated or despised as a proxy for the former leader by the protesters. The protesters hate him. After months of 抗议, demonstrations or protests, over the economic crisis. Okay, let's read this. He was backed by the Rajapaksas, Sri Lanka, Podujana Perumuna party, still the largest in parliament, and is despised as a proxy for the former leader by the protesters after months of demonstrations over the economic crisis. Okay. They have also been demanding the departure of Wickremesinghe, who has pledged to crack down if protesters take to the streets. Of course, take to the streets means to go out into the streets. So protesters also are saying this guy should leave too, or step down or depart, leave, because they don't like him either. And so he's pledged. Of course, pledge is another word for promise. I promise I will do something. I'll pledge I will do something to crack down, to take action. Okay, so let's read this. They have also been demanding the departure of Wickremesinghe, who has pledged to crack down if protesters take to the streets. Okay. Okay. Actually, I want to jump forward. So this is kind of an introduction, but I want to jump to another story related to this I was reading that actually talks specifically about, what's going on with this. So that's before we end up today, let's go to the world news. I saw this article. Crisis? There's several things. I was doing some study on this, and one is, first of all, corruption, 贪污, by the leadership, I think. But I think another thing was this is very typical. They took out a lot of loans. They borrowed money for economic development. And if you're borrowing money when things are good, that's fine, right? If your economy is growing and everything's going well, that's wonderful. You can borrow. But Rajapaksa, their family, is very famous for doing these projects that didn't make sense. Like, especially with China, right? They borrowed money from China to build an airport in the middle of nowhere. It's in his hometown. And they built this brand new international airport. And I heard that the airport now gets, I think, 2 flights a week or 3 flights a week. 每个礼拜. So there's nobody. If you see a picture of this airport, this nice airport terminal, 国际机场, there's nobody there. They built this huge harbor, 港口, right? And with China's money, and also near his hometown. And they were going to make a big, port there, and they're going to. And Sri Lanka already has a harbor, right? It's not like they don't have a harbor, but they built this new harbor, and I don't think it's used or it's not used as much. And of course, it was very controversial because 2 or 3 years ago, they could not pay the loan or the interest, the 利息 to China. So China said, okay, we want that port, 港口, for 99 years, 99年, you give it to us. And then 没有关系, you don't have to worry about the 利息. So a lot of people call this, they say this is not, now I'm not saying, I don't want to make it sound like this is all China's fault. Sri Lanka has borrowed money from a lot of places. And then the problem was after that, there are 2 or 3 other things. Last year or a year ago or 2 years ago, the Rajapaksa, when he was elected, he decided to cut taxes by 20%, 10 or 20%. And that was when the government needed more money, not less money. So he cut taxes, maybe because he thought that would make him look more popular. So he cut taxes. That brought the income down further. So then as Sri Lanka was running out of money, they were trying to find ways, the government was trying to find ways to save money. So they did something else. Farmers, they use 肥料, fertilizer, right? Now, in the old days, long time ago, we would use natural fertilizer. Fertilizer. Why don't we say it together? Fertilizer. Fertilizer. But now everyone uses not natural. It's factory made. You buy it, right? And so the Rajapaksa, the prime minister or his government, said we want to ban all imports of fertilizer because, of course, that's a lot of money they spend to bring in fertilizer. He said we want to go 有机, organic, everything. Well, what happened? Their agriculture went down too because there was no fertilizer, so farmers couldn't grow their crops. So their agriculture went, and so there's not enough food. And so then later on they said, okay, forget that. We'll import fertilizer again. But by that time it was too late. And then finally, there were 2 other things. One of their biggest industries, the economy in Sri Lanka relies on tourism, 观光客. And 2 things hurt tourism. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there was a bombing or shooting at churches, 教堂, and a bunch of people were killed, including some 观光客. So that hurt tourism. And then COVID-19. So tourism just disappeared. So then there was no money from tourism coming into Sri Lanka. So all of these things, one by one, really just brought the economy down. But I think most people would probably argue that the biggest problem has been really the government making bad decisions that hurt the economy. So here it says, and again, a few years ago, Sri Lanka was doing great. Their economy was booming. Everything seemed like it was doing okay. I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it seemed like it was a success story. So here it says, hunger pains as Sri Lanka food prices rocket. Now, hunger pain, when you feel hungry, your stomach starts to hurt, right? That's called hunger pain. So Sri Lanka food prices rocket. What does rocket mean here? Go up. What is a rocket? Yeah. Like to go to the moon or something. So here it becomes a 动词. So it means sometimes we say skyrocket, S-K-Y-R-O-C-K-E-T. That becomes one word, skyrocket, or to rocket. Means to go up really, really fast. Okay, so let's say together, rocket. Rocket. Okay, so here it says, his hair is neatly combed, but his cheeks are sunken and veins are visible on his gaunt frame. Like many Sri Lankans, Milton Pereira and his family cannot afford to buy enough food. Okay, and again, Sri Lanka wasn't considered it was considered a pretty prosperous country. So here it says his hair is neatly combed. You know what it means to comb your hair, right? A comb is like Usually, well, men and women can both use combs. Why don't we say together, comb, combed. So comb can be a 名词, but combed is neatly combed. It becomes a 形容词, but you can say, I combed my hair. Okay, his cheeks are this, right? Your cheeks are sunken. What does that mean, sunken cheeks? Yeah, it means it's in. Like if someone is not eating enough and their cheeks, or they're sick, their cheeks get like sunken or shrunken, like it's almost like to go in. Now, sink means, like a ship will sink, but sunken means it's inside. It's like this. So why don't we say together, sunken? Sunken. What are veins? It says veins. So, if you look at your arms and your, 血管. So we say his veins are visible. Yeah, 看得到, yeah. Veins are visible. So why don't we say together, veins? Veins. Okay, are visible on his gaunt frame. What does gaunt mean? Well, first of all, frame. Now, frame is like your shape. Now, of course, a building has a frame. When you build a building, we say a window frame. But if we're talking about a person's frame, it means their body, their body shape, or their body. Yeah. What? Well, your skeleton is your body's frame. I mean, really, it is. I mean, literally, it's your frame of your body. But when we're just talking about the way you look, your appearance. So what does gaunt mean? I don't think we've ever learned this word. Not gaunt, that's different. But gaunt means thin in an unhealthy way. So if someone is so thin that they look unhealthy or they look like they're sick, usually we say someone looks very gaunt. So, of course, if you say someone is slender or miao-tiao or whatever, that, seem to, well, skinny just means really, really thin. But if someone's gaunt, like we say their face is gaunt or their body is gaunt, it means when you look at them, you think, wow, this person's not eating, they're sick or they're not healthy. There's something wrong, okay? So, yeah. So why don't we say together, gaunt? Gaunt. Okay. Like Mary, okay, then obviously we know why. He's not getting enough food to eat, okay? So let's read this together. His hair is neatly combed, but his cheeks are sunken. Sunken. And veins are visible on his gaunt frame. Like many Sri Lankans, Milton Pereira and his family cannot afford to buy enough food. During the country's worst, I'll read this. During the country's worst economic crisis, which has driven rampant inflation and spurred protests that last week brought down the president, Sri Lankans are buying less, eating less, and working less. Okay, so obviously this whole economic crisis has caused another huge problem. What is that? Inflation. What is inflation? Yeah. Every day when I watch the news, I hear this word over and over again, right? Everyone's talking about inflation everywhere. Okay, so why don't we say together, inflation? Inflation. Okay, what does rampant mean? I think we've said this word before. If something is rampant, what does that mean? Yeah, out of control. Yeah, out of control. So if you say rampant crime, it means the crime is out of control. Rampant poverty means there's more and more people are getting poor. Rampant hunger, it just means it's out of control. Okay, so why don't we say together, rampant? Rampant. Okay. So the word, this economic crisis has created or caused rampant inflation and spurred. We talked about spur before. It means to drive, to push protests that last week brought down the president. I mean, the president, we just said, Shathai, right? He left. Sri Lankans are buying less, eating less, and working less. Okay, so this is all part of the problem. Okay, let's read this. During the country's worst economic crisis, which has driven rampant inflation. Let's say it again. Rampant inflation and spurred protests that last week brought down the president. Sri Lankans are buying less, eating less, and working less. It's very difficult to live. Even a loaf of bread is expensive, Pereira said outside his modest home in Slave Island, a poor enclave of the capital, Colombo. If we take one meal, we skip another. Okay, so, a loaf of bread, of course, is, when you buy a bread, usually bright in a loaf, is expensive. Now, we say modest home. Modest can mean, if a person is modest, usually it's like saying they're humble, right? Yeah. But here, when we say a modest home, what does that mean? Of course, a home can't be humble. Well, actually, we could say a humble home. So a humble home or a modest home means what? Yeah, it's nothing much. It's not fancy, it's not big, it's just kind of small or not too wealthy or not too rich. So you say, it doesn't always mean poor. You could say my apartment is very humble, or I live in a humble, a modest home, or it doesn't mean you're poor. It just means it's not fancy, it's not expensive. Okay? So why don't we say together modest home. Okay, on this island, Slave Island, which doesn't sound very good. Slave Island. Slave means what? Nuli, right? Yeah. A poor enclave of the capital. Now the capital is called Colombo, but a poor enclave. Now poor, of course, means chongda, but enclave is a very interesting word. Does anyone know what that means? Yeah, it means it almost means like a suburb. A suburb, we talked about a suburb. How do you say suburb? Yeah, so, like Fengyuan is a suburb of downtown Taichung. But yeah, we could say enclave is kind of like an area outside or connected to, but on the outskirts of something. So we say enclave. Why don't we say together enclave? Enclave. Now, we don't use this word as much as suburb. We use the word suburb, or sometimes we could say outskirts, the outskirts of a city. So you could say this Slave Island is on the okay. So outskirts. Sorry, I hope you can say it. OUTSKIRTS, on the outskirts of. That's usually how we say it. We can say, I don't know, Salu is on the outskirts of Taichung, but you could say Salu is an enclave of Taichung City. Okay, so one more time, enclave. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Kaliningrad. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's probably other ways to describe that place, but yeah. So yeah, it's not a very specifically described word, but yeah, we could say that, an enclave. Yeah. Okay, so let's read this. It's very difficult to live. Even a loaf of bread is expensive, Pereira said outside his modest home in Slave Island, a poor enclave of the capital, Colombo. If we take one meal, we skip another. When I see this, actually, I think what it is Slave Island is probably not an island. It's actually the name of an area, because I notice it says in Slave Island. If it was an island, it would say on Slave Island. So Slave Island must be like a district, like a chu, an area, okay? So of this in the capital. With 6 children in the family, the 74-year-old said the best they have been able to afford in the past few weeks was the occasional fish cut into small pieces for everyone. Okay, so that's pretty serious. Okay, so let's read this. With 6 children in the family, the 74-year-old said the best they have been able to afford in the past few weeks was the occasional fish cut into small pieces for everyone. Okay, so I think you, of course, know what afford is. You can't afford. You say, whenever you want to buy something, you say, can I afford this? Or as a 形容词, we say, is this affordable, right? A-F-F-O-R-D-A-B-L-E, affordable. So if something is affordable, it means, I can buy it. It's reasonable. It's not too expensive. Okay. It says here, because, well, we're almost out of time, but I'll just read this and then we'll be done. Actually, we'll read 2 more here. It says, because we don't have much money, sometimes we give the fish to the children, he said, adding that the adults only eat the gravy. Triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's financial woes were exacerbated by government mismanagement, critics say. Okay, so you know what gravy is, right? 肉酱, right? 肉酱. Like when I was in America, I love to eat mashed potatoes, 马铃薯泥, right? If you eat mashed potatoes, you have to have gravy with it. Okay, so why don't we say together, gravy, gravy. Okay, now caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's financial woe. And what's another word for woe? Well, just problems, troubles. Actually, trouble is probably the best word. Our troubles, our financial troubles. Okay, so why don't we say together, woes, woes. There's a very famous saying, if someone says, oh yeah, I have big problems, you say, woe is me. Woe is me, it's a strange expression, but woe is me means I'm in trouble. I've got problems, okay? So we're exacerbated by, and this is a good word, I don't know if we've learned it, but what does exacerbate mean? Yes, very good. Worsen, to make worse. So if something has been exacerbated by, it means to worsen by, okay? So why don't we say together, exacerbate. Exacerbate. Okay, and it was made worse by what? Government mismanagement. If you manage something poorly or badly, we say it was mismanaged, not done in a very good way or in a bad way, okay? So let's say that too, mismanagement. Mismanagement. Okay, so we'll read this and then we'll be done. Because we don't have much money, sometimes we give the fish to the children, he said, adding that the adults only eat the gravy. Triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's financial woes were exacerbated by government mismanagement, critics say. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I really hope that Sri Lanka gets the help they need, money they need for the sake of the people, and I hope they get better leaders too. I will say, when I was in the U.S., I did notice, and well, I've noticed this in Taiwan too. There definitely is an inflation situation, right? Everything's getting more expensive, but hopefully not too expensive. So yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's all we have time for today. We'll see you next week. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Johnny， 那就是我们有开一个就是这个班的群组，那我会把就是今天上课笔记放在里面。 那在道格老师没有上课的时候，我们会自己组一个英文的，就是读书会，我们会大家一起来讨论。那已经有一些同学已经参加过，如果有兴趣的话，可以问问看身边同学有参加过的。对，我们会一起开启一个英文的讨论会这样子。那有任何问题的话，或者想要加入我们群，就可以来找我，谢谢。